My name is Vanessa and I'm 27 years old. When my mum died of cancer, my world shattered. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. My father abandoned me to start a new life with another woman and her children. I cut all ties with him and eventually found happiness with Patrick, my fiancé, who helped me heal, or so I thought. Until Patrick secretly contacted my father and staged a reconciliation to please his savior complex. Now he's begging for a second chance after I broke up with him and called off our wedding. Let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear what happens when someone with a savior complex meddles with your trauma. Growing up, my mother Sarah and I had the kind of relationship most daughters only dream about. She was my best friend, my confidant, and my biggest supporter. We would spend weekends baking cookies together or going on impromptu road trips to small towns within driving distance. She taught me how to navigate life with grace and kindness, always reminding me that our choices define who we become. My father James was present, but always somewhat emotionally distant. He worked long hours as a financial advisor and often missed family dinners and school events. Mum would make excuses for him, saying he was working hard to provide for us. I believed her because I wanted to. Everything changed during my sophomore year of college. I was 20 years old, studying architecture and planning my future, when Mum called with news that stopped my world. Cancer. Stage 3 breast cancer that had already spread to her lymph nodes. "It'll be okay, sweetheart," she said over the phone, her voice steady despite delivering such devastating news. "The doctors say we caught it in time to fight it." I immediately packed my bags and drove 6 hours home. When I arrived, I found Mum sitting at the kitchen table with pamphlets about treatment options spread out before her. Dad was nowhere to be seen. "He's processing," Mum explained, but the slight tremble in her voice told me she needed him there too. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I approached my parents with my plan to take a leave of absence from college to help care for Mum during her treatment. Dad immediately objected. "You can't throw away your education, Vanessa. Your mother wouldn't want that." But when I looked at Mum, I saw relief in her eyes. "Just for a semester," I promised. "I can take online classes and keep up with some coursework." What started as a temporary break became a 2-year journey through the hell that is watching someone you love fight for their life. Chemo, radiation surgeries, experimental treatments. I drove Mum to every appointment, held her hand, through every procedure, and learned to inject medications and change dressings. Throughout this time, Dad became increasingly absent. He started coming home later, missing important doctor appointments and spending weekends working. Mum never complained, but I saw how his absence hurt her. "He's dealing with this in his own way," she would say when I expressed my frustration. Some people can't face mortality head-on. As Mum's condition worsened, our conversations deepened. During long nights when pain kept her awake, we talked about everything. Her childhood, her hopes for my future, her regrets. "The only thing that matters is love, Vanessa," she told me one night as I adjusted her pillows. "Promise me you'll build a good life filled with love, no matter what happens." "I promise," I said, fighting back tears. "But you're going to be there to see it." She just smiled and squeezed my hand. 3 days before Mum died, she asked to go home from the hospital. The doctors advised against it, but she was adamant. "I want to die in my own bed surrounded by my memories," she said. We set up hospice care at home. Dad took time off work finally, but spent most of his time making phone calls in his study rather than sitting with Mum. The night she died, I was holding her hand. Dad had gone to get coffee and missed her final moments. She looked at me suddenly clear-eyed after days of morphine-induced haze. "Remember your promise," she whispered. "Build your good life, and Vanessa, learn to forgive, not for others but for yourself." Those were her last words. When Dad returned with his coffee, Mum was gone. He stood in the doorway, cup slipping from his fingers to crash on the floor. "I didn't get to say goodbye," he said, his voice hollow. I wanted to scream that he'd had 2 years to say goodbye but had chosen not to be present. Instead, I silently cleaned up the spilled coffee while he called the hospice nurse. Planning the funeral fell mostly to me. Dad seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and disappearing for hours at a time. I chose Mum's favourite flowers, selected readings she had loved, and picked the songs that would be played. The day after the funeral, while sorting through Mum's belongings, I found her journal. Against my better judgment, I read it. The last entries detailed her awareness of Dad's affair. She had known he was seeing someone named Melissa for months, but had decided not to confront him. "I don't want my final days filled with anger," she had written. "Vanessa will need him when I'm gone. I hope he will do right by her." When I confronted Dad with this information, he didn't even try to deny it. Your mother understood that life goes on, he said, as if that excused his betrayal. 6 weeks after Mum's funeral, Dad announced he was moving out. He had already found an apartment and would be taking only his personal belongings. I need to live my life now, Vanessa, he said as he packed his clothes. Your mother would want me to be happy. Yaman. I stood in the doorway of his bedroom, watching him dismantle 25 years of marriage as if it meant nothing. What about me? I finally asked. Mum would want you to be there for me too. He paused briefly. You're an adult now. You need to build your own life. I'll always be your father, but I need a fresh start. 2 months later, I learned through a family friend that Dad had married Melissa, a woman 15 years younger with 2 children from a previous marriage, ages 8 and 10. He had become an instant father to her kids while abandoning his own daughter. I was left with the family home, which thankfully had been paid off, but all other financial support stopped. When I asked Dad for help with tuition to complete my degree, he claimed he couldn't afford it due to his new family obligations. I took out student loans, worked part-time jobs, and eventually returned to college to finish my degree. The day I graduated, I saved a seat for Dad, hoping against hope that he would show up. He didn't. Later I learned he had taken his stepchildren to Disney World that weekend. The final break came when I confronted him about missing my graduation. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. You need to stop living in the past, Vanessa. He said, checking his watch repeatedly during our conversation. I have a new life now, and you should too. Your mother wouldn't want you to be bitter. His invocation of Mum pushed me over the edge. Don't you dare tell me what Mum would want, I said, keeping my voice low but intense. She wanted you to be there for me after she was gone. She wrote that in her journal, and you failed her. That's not fair, he protested. I'm still your father. No, I said, gathering my things to leave. You're just the man who was married to my mother. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a father anymore. I walked out of that coffee shop and cut all ties with him. That was 5 years ago, and until recently, I hadn't spoken to him since. The months after officially cutting ties with my father were some of the darkest of my life. Grief over Mum's death combined with the abandonment by Dad created a perfect storm of depression. I retreated into isolation, barely leaving the house except for work and necessities. Some days I couldn't find the energy to get out of bed. The house that had once been filled with Mum's laughter felt empty and cold. I considered selling it, but couldn't bear to part with the last physical connection to our family life. Financial reality eventually forced me into action. The house might have been paid for, but property taxes, utilities, and student loans wouldn't pay themselves. I took on multiple jobs. During the day, I worked as a junior draftsperson at a small architectural firm. Evenings and weekends, I waited tables at a local restaurant. My social life became non-existent, but the constant activity kept the darkest thoughts at bay. Slowly, I formed connections with co-workers at both jobs. Amanda from the architectural firm started inviting me to lunch, refusing to take no for an answer. You need sunlight and human interaction, she insisted. It's not optional. At the restaurant, I met Darius, the head chef, who took a brotherly interest in my well-being. He would save plates of food for me to take home, saying, "You're too skinny, girl. Eat." These small kindnesses were lifelines pulling me back toward the living. Amanda introduced me to her friend group, who welcomed me without questions or pressure. For Thanksgiving that year, Darius insisted I join his large, boisterous family dinner rather than spend the holiday alone. Family isn't just blood, he told me as his mother piled my plate high with food. Family is who shows up. With their support, I completed my architectural licensing exams and secured a full-time position that allowed me to quit the restaurant job. Financial stability brought a measure of peace, though the emotional scars remained. Through Amanda's gentle persistence, I finally agreed to see a therapist. Dr. Helen Myers specialized in grief and abandonment issues. Our weekly sessions were painful but necessary, like lancing a wound to allow healing. Your father's actions aren't a reflection of your worth, Dr. Myers reminded me often. They're a reflection of his character. Those words became my mantra on difficult days, especially holidays and milestones, when family absence felt most acute. I created new traditions with my chosen family. Christmas Eve at Amanda's apartment, New Year's potluck dinners, birthday celebrations that gradually became less about filling an absence and more about genuine enjoyment. Despite my efforts to disconnect completely from my father, information occasionally filtered through via distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. Each update was like picking at a scab. I learned that Dad had fully integrated into Melissa's family life. He coached her son's baseball team and attended her daughter's dance recitals. Photos on social media showed happy family vacations and celebrations from which I was conspicuously absent. The most painful revelation came from my mother's cousin Janet, who mentioned casually during a phone call that my father was paying college tuition for both stepchildren. "He's so proud of them," Janet said, apparently unaware that he had refused to help with my education. "He talks about them all the time." After that conversation, I blocked Janet and several other relatives who maintained connections with Dad. The comparison between his devotion to his stepchildren and abandonment of me was too painful to bear. Holidays were particularly difficult. Mother's Day brought memories of brunches and handmade cards. Father's Day stirred a complex mixture of anger and loss. Christmas highlighted the absence of family traditions. Each year, though, these days became slightly easier to navigate as I built my own life. In my professional life, I channeled my emotions into creativity. My designs were praised for their combination of functionality and emotional resonance. "You create spaces that feel like sanctuaries," like my boss remarked during a performance review. If only he knew how desperately I had needed such spaces in my own life. As my career advanced, I took pride in my self-sufficiency. Every achievement was hard-won without parental support or guidance. Each promotion and successful project proved that I could thrive despite abandonment. Still, there were moments that caught me off guard. Seeing fathers walking daughters down the aisle at weddings I attended. Watching dads with their adult children at restaurants laughing and sharing stories. These glimpses of what I had lost could ambush me with grief when I least expected it. 4 years after cutting ties with Dad, I received a wedding invitation from a childhood friend. The RSVP card asked if I would be bringing a +1. For the first time, I realized that while I had built a life filled with friendships and professional success, I had kept romantic relationships at a distance. Dr. Myers helped me recognize my fear of abandonment had manifested as an unwillingness to be vulnerable with potential partners. "You've built walls to protect yourself," she said, "but walls that keep out pain also keep out love." This insight sparked a resolution to open myself to the possibility of romance despite the risks. I updated my long-dormant dating profile and accepted setups from well-meaning friends. Most dates went nowhere, but each one was practice in lowering my defenses slightly. I began to recognize that while I couldn't choose my biological family, I could choose how I responded to the hand life had dealt me. I could remain bitter and closed off, or I could risk being hurt again for the chance at genuine connection. "Your mother wanted you to build a good life filled with love," Dr. Myers reminded me during a particularly difficult session. "That was her final wish for you." With that thought guiding me, I committed to moving forward rather than remaining trapped in the past. I couldn't change my father's choices, but I could make my own. I chose hope over fear, possibility over safety. I chose to honor Mum's last wish by opening my heart again. I met Patrick on a rainy Tuesday evening at my friend Amanda's art gallery opening. He was admiring a landscape painting that reminded me of a place my mother and I used to visit. When I mentioned this, he turned and gave me his full attention as if nothing else in the room mattered. "Tell me about this place," he said, and actually listened to my answer. Patrick was tall with kind eyes and a quiet confidence. He worked as a social worker, specializing in youth programs, helping teenagers from troubled homes find their footing. His passion for helping others was immediately apparent and deeply attractive to me. He asked for my number that night and called rather than texted to arrange our first date. "I'd rather hear your voice," he explained. Our early dating period moved slowly with Patrick, respecting my initial guardedness. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give, seeming to instinctively understand my need for space and patience. "We have time," he would say whenever I apologized for moving slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." 3 months into dating, we were having dinner at his apartment when he asked about my family. I had been vague, until then mentioning only that my mother had passed away and I wasn't close with my father. That night, something about the safety I felt with Patrick allowed me to share the whole story. I told him about Mum's illness, Dad's betrayal, and the years of rebuilding my life alone. Throughout my telling, Patrick listened without interrupting, his eyes reflecting compassion rather than pity. When I finished, he took my hand across the table. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he said simply. "Your mother would be incredibly proud of the woman you've become." His response, free from platitudes or attempts to fix my pain, confirmed what I was beginning to feel about Patrick. Here was someone who could witness my wounds without being frightened away or trying to apply hasty bandages. As our relationship deepened, Patrick introduced me to his family. His parents welcomed me warmly, and his two sisters treated me like one of their own from the start. Sunday dinners at the Wilson house became a cherished ritual, filling a void I hadn't fully acknowledged. After 2 years of dating, we decided to move in together. We found an apartment halfway between my architectural firm and the community centre where Patrick worked. The process of combining our lives from furniture to routines was surprisingly seamless. "You make it easy to build a life with you," Patrick told me as we unpacked books onto shared shelves. "It's like we were meant to find each other." Our home became a haven. I designed a reading nook by the window where Patrick would unwind after emotionally taxing days at work. He created a home office space that maximized natural light for my architectural drawings. We complemented each other's strengths and supported each other's dreams. As our 3rd anniversary approached, we began discussing our future in more concrete terms. The topic of children surfaced naturally, but brought with it my deep-seated fears. "What if I don't know how to be a good parent?" I asked Patrick one night as we lay in bed. My model for family life fell apart so completely. Patrick propped himself up on one elbow, looking at me seriously. "You are not your father, Vanessa. You know better than anyone what a child needs because you know what it feels like not to have those needs met." His confidence in me was both comforting and slightly troubling. I sometimes worried that Patrick saw me as one of his rehabilitation projects, rather than a partner with flaws and sharp edges. When he mentioned potentially inviting my father to our hypothetical future children's birthday parties so they can know their grandfather, I firmly shut down the idea. "My father doesn't get access to any children we might have," I said definitively. "He lost that right when he abandoned me for his ready-made new family." Patrick accepted this boundary, though I sometimes caught expressions crossing his face that suggested he thought time might change my mind. I attributed this to his professional optimism about human capacity for change and reconciliation. On our 3rd anniversary, Patrick proposed during a private sunset picnic at the Botanical Gardens. He had arranged for us to have exclusive access to the rose pavilion, my mother's favourite flower, featured prominently in the decorations. "Vanessa, you've taught me what real strength looks like," he said, kneeling before me with a vintage-style ring that somehow perfectly matched my taste. "I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you. Will you marry me?" The tears that sprang to my eyes were unexpected but welcome. For the first time since losing Mum, I felt unambiguously happy. "Yes," I said, pulling him to his feet and into my arms. "Absolutely yes." Wedding planning brought expected joy but also complicated emotions. The absence of family on my side became glaringly obvious as we compiled guest lists and planned seating arrangements. Patrick's large supportive family only highlighted what I lacked. When his mother gently asked if I had considered inviting my father, I was firm. "He won't be part of our wedding. He hasn't been part of my life for 7 years, and I want to keep it that way." She never mentioned it again, but I noticed Patrick's slight frown. Later that night, he broached the subject carefully. "I respect your decision about your father," he began, "but I also believe in the power of forgiveness to heal old wounds. Perhaps the wedding could be an opportunity for reconciliation." I explained, not for the first time, that forgiveness was not the issue. I have forgiven him in the sense that I don't let anger toward him consume my life anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoring a relationship with someone who has proven themselves untrustworthy and hurtful. Patrick nodded and dropped the subject, but something in his expression nagged at me. It was the same look I had seen him give to teenagers at the centre who resisted his well-intentioned guidance. It was a look that said, "I know better than you what you need." At the time, I dismissed my unease. Patrick had been nothing but supportive and loving. If he occasionally displayed his helper tendencies with me, wasn't that just part of who he was? I loved his compassionate nature and desire to heal broken things. What I didn't realise then was that Patrick didn't see me as completely healed. In his mind, I was still damaged by my father's abandonment, and true healing could only come through reconciliation. This fundamental misconception about my needs would ultimately shatter the foundation of our relationship. As wedding plans progressed, Patrick became increasingly interested in my family history. He asked questions about Dad that I had never thought important. Where did he work now? Did I know if he was still married to Melissa? Did any relatives still keep in touch with him? I answered vaguely, emphasizing that these details were irrelevant to our lives. "The past is past," I insisted. "I'm focused on our future together." Patrick would smile and agree, but I now realize he was collecting information piece by piece. Information he would later use to orchestrate what he believed would be my salvation, but what would actually become the greatest betrayal of my trust since my father walked away. 6 months before our wedding date, Patrick's behaviour began to change. He became secretive, taking phone calls in another room and being vague about his whereabouts certain evenings. My first instinct was to worry he might be having second thoughts about marrying me, or worse, seeing someone else. One evening, when Patrick said he had to work late, I called the community centre on a pretext only to learn he had left at his regular time. When he came home hours later, he kissed me distractedly and mentioned a work emergency without offering details. My stomach nodded with anxiety. This wasn't like Patrick, who had always been open and honest with me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but doubt had crept in and wouldn't leave. Checking our phone bill online, I noticed multiple calls to a number I didn't recognize. The calls were often lengthy, some lasting over an hour. When I tried calling the number myself, it went straight to voicemail with no identifying message. After 2 weeks of growing suspicion, I confronted Patrick. We were washing dishes together after dinner, a nightly ritual that usually involved comfortable conversation about our days. "Is there something you want to tell me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the fear clawing at my throat. "You've been distant lately, secretive." Patrick's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What do you mean?" "The late nights, the private phone calls, the number on our bill that you've been calling for hours." My voice cracked slightly. "If you're having doubts about us, I need to know now." Patrick looked genuinely shocked. He dried his hands quickly and pulled me into an embrace. "God no, Vanessa. I'm not having doubts. I'm not cheating. Nothing like that." "Then what is it?" I asked against his shoulder. He pulled back, looking both guilty and excited. "I've been working on a surprise for the wedding. Something I think will be really meaningful for you." Relief washed through me, followed quickly by lingering suspicion. "What kind of surprise requires secret phone calls and lying about where you are?" Patrick's expression turned pleading. "I can't tell you without ruining it. Please trust me. It's nothing bad, I promise." I wanted to believe him. After all, Patrick had never given me reason to distrust him before. I nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but no more lies about where you are, even for a surprise." That scared me. "I promise," he said, kissing my forehead. "No more lies." A week later, while checking my email, I received a Facebook notification. Someone had sent me a friend request. I clicked on it absently, then froze when I saw the name James Winters, my father. I hadn't seen his face in 7 years, but there he was smiling in his profile picture, with his arm around Melissa. My hands trembled as I clicked on his profile. According to his information, he still lived in the same city about 30 miles from my apartment. As I stared at the screen, a message notification appeared. From him. "Vanessa, Patrick told me about the wedding. I'd love to reconnect before your big day. I've missed you." The world tilted sideways. Patrick had contacted my father, the father I had explicitly repeatedly said I wanted nothing to do with. The betrayal was so unexpected, so complete, that for several minutes I couldn't move or think clearly. When Patrick came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open to my father's message. I didn't speak as Patrick hung up his coat and greeted me with his usual warmth. When he leaned in to kiss me, I turned my face away. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, concerned. I turned the laptop toward him. "Want to explain this to me?" Patrick's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, and finally a disturbing hint of self-righteousness. He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I was going to tell you soon," he began. "I wanted to wait until I had everything arranged." "Arranged?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "What exactly have you been arranging behind my back?" Patrick took a deep breath. "I found your father about 2 months ago. It wasn't that difficult, actually. He's still friends with your mother's cousin on Facebook." The casual way he admitted to this violation made my stomach turn. "And you've been what?" "Having secret conversations with him, planning something involving him and me. Vanessa, everyone deserves a second chance," Patrick said, his social worker voice emerging. "I've gotten to know your father over the past weeks, and he deeply regrets losing his relationship with you. He was overwhelmed by grief when your mother died and made mistakes he wishes he could undo." The excuses Patrick was making for my father inflamed my anger further. "So in your professional opinion, I should just forgive and forget 7 years of complete abandonment. The fact that he chose his new wife's children over me, that he refused to help me through college while paying for their education." Patrick leaned forward earnestly. "People change, Vanessa. Grief makes people do things they later regret. Your father has grown a lot since then. He talks about you constantly, about how proud he is of what you've accomplished on your own. On my own, I repeated, emphasizing the words. Because I had to. Because he left me with nothing but a paid-off house and emotional scars. Patrick reached for my hand. I pulled it away. I was just trying to help heal this wound before our wedding, he said. I thought having your father walk you down the aisle would be a beautiful moment of reconciliation. The mention of the aisle broke through my shock. You've been planning for him to be part of our wedding without asking me. I wanted it to be a surprise. Patrick said, his tone suggesting he still didn't understand the magnitude of his betrayal. I've been meeting with him weekly, getting to know him, helping him understand how to make amends properly. Weekly meetings, I echoed, remembering all the nights he claimed to be working late. For how long exactly? About 2 months, Patrick admitted. He's eager to reconnect Vanessa. He's prepared to apologize and make things right. The full picture was becoming clear, and it was far worse than I had imagined. Patrick hadn't just contacted my father. He had been cultivating a relationship with him, coaching him, and planning a grand reconciliation moment at what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Let me make something absolutely clear, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. My father will not be at our wedding. He will not walk me down the aisle. He will not be part of our lives in any capacity. Patrick's expression showed genuine confusion. But I've already arranged everything. He's coming to dinner tomorrow night to see you. I've reserved a private room at Giovanni's. I thought a public place would make it easier. The revelation that this ambush was planned for the very next day sent a wave of panic through me. Cancel it. Right now. Call him and cancel. Vanessa, please. Just meet with him once. If it doesn't go well, I won't bring it up again. Patrick's pleading tone did nothing to soften my fury. You had no right, I said, my voice breaking. No right to contact him without my knowledge. No right to share details about our wedding, about my life. No right to make decisions about my relationship with the man who abandoned me when I needed him most. Patrick's expression shifted to one I recognized from his work with troubled teens, a mixture of patience and conviction that he knew what was best. Sometimes we need someone else to help us take steps we're afraid to take ourselves. I'm just trying to help you heal completely before we start our life together. His words revealed a fundamental truth I had somehow missed during our years together. Patrick didn't see me as whole. In his eyes, I was damaged goods, a project to be fixed before I was worthy of becoming his wife. The realization was like ice water in my veins. I don't need to be fixed, Patrick. I'm not one of your troubled teenagers. I'm a grown woman who made a deliberate choice to remove a toxic person from my life. Patrick shook his head slightly, the gesture infuriating in its condescension. It's not about fixing you. It's about healing old wounds so they don't affect our marriage and any children we might have. The mention of children pushed me over the edge. I stood up abruptly. I need to leave. I can't look at you right now. Where are you going? Patrick asked, standing too. Out, anywhere that isn't here. I grabbed my purse and keys. Don't follow me. Don't call. I need space to think. Vanessa, please, Patrick called as I headed for the door. Tomorrow night is important. Your father has already bought a plane ticket. I turned back, hand on the doorknob. A plane ticket. Where is he flying from? Denver. He moved there 3 years ago for Melissa's job. Another piece of information about my father's life that Patrick knew and I didn't. Another reminder of how thoroughly he had invaded a part of my life I had walled off for my own protection. Cancel the dinner, Patrick, and tell my father to get a refund on his ticket. I will not be seeing him tomorrow or any other day. With that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. The cool evening air hit my flushed face as tears began to fall. Not only had Patrick betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible, but he had also made it clear that he never truly understood me or respected my boundaries. I walked for hours through the city park, retracing the pain of my father's abandonment, and now adding a fresh layer of betrayal. The man I had trusted most in the world, the man I had agreed to marry, had gone behind my back to reconnect me with the very person who had caused my deepest wounds. And he had done it believing he was helping me. That perhaps was the most painful realization of all. Patrick truly believed he knew better than I did what I needed to heal. His savior complex, which I had found endearing when directed at his work, had been turned on me without my consent. By the time I returned to our apartment, it was past midnight. I had hoped Patrick would be asleep, giving me time to gather my thoughts before facing him again. Instead, I found him sitting on the couch in the dark, waiting. And he wasn't alone. My father stood as I entered the living room, his face a mixture of hope and uncertainty. 7 years had aged him visibly. His hair had greyed completely, and deep lines framed his eyes and mouth. He wore an expensive-looking sweater and pressed slacks, as if he had dressed carefully for this meeting. Patrick rose beside him, his expression painfully eager. "Vanessa, I know this is a surprise, but James arrived early and came straight here. I thought maybe it would be better to talk in private rather than at the restaurant." The shock of seeing my father standing in my living room rendered me momentarily speechless. My brain couldn't process the reality of his physical presence in the space I had created deliberately without him. "Nessa," my father said, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. "You look so much like your mother." His voice broke the spell of silence. "Don't call me that," I said flatly. "And don't mention my mother. You lost that right." Dad's face fell, but he nodded. "I understand you're angry. You have every right to be." "This isn't happening," I said, looking directly at Patrick. "I told you explicitly that I didn't want to see him. I asked you to cancel this." Patrick moved toward me, hands extended placatingly. "I know, but when James called from the airport, I thought it would be a waste to send him away without at least a conversation. You don't have to decide anything tonight, just talk." "A waste," I repeated incredulously. "My boundaries are a waste to you." Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Maybe I should go. This was clearly a mistake." "The mistake was leaving your daughter alone to care for her dying mother while you started a new life." I said the words bursting forth after years of silence. "The mistake was marrying your mistress 6 weeks after Mum's funeral. The mistake was refusing to help me with college while paying for your stepchildren's education." Dad flinched at each accusation, but didn't deny them. "I know I failed you, Vanessa. I was drowning in grief and made terrible choices." "Grief," I laughed bitterly. "You weren't grieving, you were relieved. You couldn't wait to start over with your new family and pretend the old one never existed." Patrick stepped between us. "Vanessa, I know you're hurt, but this kind of anger isn't healthy. James has flown all this way to make amends." The way Patrick positioned himself physically and emotionally on my father's side was the final straw. In that moment, I saw with complete clarity that Patrick had never truly been on my side. He had always been working toward what he believed was my salvation, whether I wanted it or not. Memories flashed through my mind. The funeral where I had stood alone while Dad spent most of the time on his phone. The graduation ceremony with an empty seat where my father should have been. The nights I had worked double shifts to pay tuition bills while Dad posted photos of family vacations with his stepchildren. The Christmas morning when I woke up alone in the house for the first time after Mum died. "You missed everything," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You missed my college graduation because you took your stepchildren to Disney World. You missed every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. When I got my first professional job, when I bought my first car, when I earned my architecture license, you weren't there. You chose another family over me, over and over again." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "I know, I have no excuse. I was selfish and short-sighted. I convinced myself you were strong like your mother, that you would be fine without me." "I was fine without you," I corrected. "I am fine without you. That's what you don't understand. I built a life despite your abandonment, not because of it." Patrick took my arm gently. "This is good, Vanessa. Getting these feelings out is the first step toward healing." I pulled away from him. "Stop trying to manage this conversation like one of your therapy sessions. This isn't about healing. This is about respect, and you've shown me none." Dad stepped forward. "Don't blame Patrick. He only reached out because he loves you and wants you to be happy. He thought having me walk you down the aisle might help close this chapter." The mention of the wedding from my father's lips felt like a violation. "You will never walk me down the aisle," I said with absolute finality. "That honor would have gone to Mum's brother if he was still alive. Since he's not, I'll walk myself. I don't need anyone to give me away. I'm not property." Dad nodded sadly. "I understand, but I hope you'll at least consider allowing me to attend the wedding. I'd sit in the back. You wouldn't even have to speak to me. I just want to see my daughter get married." The audacity of his request after 7 years of complete absence stunned me. "Are you serious right now? You think you can disappear from my life for 7 years and then just show up for the highlight reel moments? That's not how being a parent works." "I know I don't deserve it," Dad admitted, "but I was hoping for a chance to be part of your life again, even in a small way. Melissa and I have separated. The kids are in college now. I've had a lot of time to reflect on my mistakes. This new information did nothing to soften my resolve. If anything, it confirmed my suspicions. Now that his ready-made family was no longer intact, he was looking to reconnect with the daughter he had discarded. "I need both of you to leave," I said, my decision crystallizing. Dad, go back to your hotel. Go back to Denver. Go anywhere that isn't here. We have nothing more to say to each other. Dad opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. This was your mother's. I should have given it to you years ago. He placed it on the coffee table and moved toward the door. I'll respect your wishes, Vanessa, he said quietly, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry for everything. Not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did to you. After he left, the apartment fell into tense silence. Patrick stood watching me, his expression a mixture of disappointment and confusion. That didn't go how I hoped it, he finally said. The understatement was so profound that I nearly laughed. What exactly did you hope would happen, that I would fall into his arms, forgive 7 years of abandonment, and invite him to play a starring role in our wedding? Patrick ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I hoped you would at least listen to him, give him a chance to apologize properly, consider the possibility of reconciliation. This isn't a Hallmark movie, Patrick. Real reconciliation takes more than one teary apology and a mysterious package. It requires accountability, changed behavior over time, and earned trust, none of which my father has demonstrated. People can change, Vanessa. I see it every day in my work. The teenagers I counsel, the parents who learn better ways to connect with their children. Reconciliation is possible if you're open to it. This isn't about whether people can change, I said, exhaustion settling into my bones. This is about you making decisions about my life without my consent. It's about you deciding what I need to heal without asking me. It's about betrayal of trust. Patrick looked genuinely confused. How is trying to help you reconnect with your only living parent a betrayal? Because I explicitly told you I didn't want contact with him. I set that boundary clearly multiple times. And you ignored it because you thought you knew better than me what I needed. I was just trying to help, Patrick said, his voice smaller now. No, I corrected. You were trying to fix me, to make me whole according to your definition of wholeness, which apparently requires family reconciliation, regardless of how toxic that family member might be. Patrick shook his head. That's not fair. I love you. I want you to be happy. If you loved me, you would respect my choices. You would trust that I know what I need better than you do. I twisted the engagement ring on my finger. I can't marry someone who doesn't trust my judgment about my own life. Patrick's eyes widened as he realized the direction of the conversation. Vanessa, no. We can work through this. I made a mistake, yes, but my intentions were good. Your intentions don't matter as much as your actions, I said, removing the ring and placing it on the coffee table next to the package from my father. And your actions have shown me that you don't truly see me as an equal partner. You see me as someone to be rescued. That's not true, Patrick protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Please don't do this. We can postpone the wedding, get counseling work through this. I need you to leave, I said, too emotionally exhausted to continue the conversation. I'll pack your essential things tomorrow and leave them with your sister. We can figure out the rest of it later. You're really ending our engagement over this? Patrick asked, disbelief evident in his voice. I'm ending our engagement because you fundamentally betrayed my trust in a way that can't be repaired. You conspired with the person who hurt me most in the world, shared private details about my life with him, and planned to ambush me with his presence at what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. All because you think you know better than I do what I need. Patrick stood silently for a long moment, then gathered his coat and keys. At the door, he turned back. I really do love you, Vanessa. Everything I did was because I thought it would help heal the pain I could see you still carrying. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never asked if I wanted your help with that pain. You just decided to fix it without my consent. After Patrick left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, looking at the engagement ring and the small package from my father. 7 years of carefully constructed boundaries had been demolished in a single evening. The sanctuary I had created in my life had been invaded by the very person I had worked so hard to excise from it. More devastating than seeing my father, though, was the realization that the man I had planned to marry had never truly seen or respected me. In his eyes, I had always been damaged, a project to be fixed, rather than a partner to be honored. I called the wedding venue the next morning to cancel our reservation. The coordinator's sympathetic voice as she processed the cancellation brought fresh tears. I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Winters. Is there anything we can do? No, I said, wiping my eyes. Some things just can't be fixed. Next, I sent a brief email to our wedding party explaining that the wedding was off. I provided no details, promising to speak with each of them personally when I felt stronger. As responses began to trickle in expressions of shock and concern filling my inbox, the finality of my decision settled over me. I had lost not only my fiancé, but the future I had carefully planned with him. The life I had been building for the past 4 years had crumbled in a single night because of a fundamental misunderstanding at its foundation. Patrick had never truly known me at all. The week after ending my engagement was a blur of grief and isolation. I took personal leave from work, unable to focus on architectural designs when my personal foundation had collapsed. I ignored calls and messages needing space to process the dual betrayal by the two men who should have cared for me most. Patrick's attempts to contact me were relentless. Dozens of text messages ranging from apologetic to defensive, voicemails pleading for a second chance, emails explaining his perspective in exhaustive detail. Each one revealed more clearly how fundamentally he had misunderstood me and our relationship. I was only trying to help heal your family before we started our own. Read one message. I couldn't bear the thought of our children not knowing their grandfather, said another. The presumption that I needed his intervention to heal infuriated me anew with each message. Even in his apologies, Patrick positioned himself as the well-intentioned hero and me as the wounded soul who didn't know what was best for herself. My father, to his credit, respected my wishes and didn't attempt further contact after that night. The small package he had left remained unopened on my bedside table, a tangible reminder of the past I had worked so hard to move beyond. 3 days after the confrontation, flowers arrived at my door. The expensive arrangement came with a card in Patrick's handwriting. Please talk to me. I know I made a mistake, but it came from a place of love. Everyone deserves a second chance. The irony of his plea for a second chance, alongside his campaign for my father's second chance, wasn't lost on me. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home. Patrick's family began calling next. His mother left tearful voicemails about how we could work through this misunderstanding. His sisters texted that I was overreacting to a well-intentioned mistake. Only his father seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, sending a single message: "I'm sorry he hurt you. Take the time you need." Friends fell into distinct camps. Those who had known me longest understood immediately why Patrick's actions were unforgivable. He had no right, Amanda said firmly when I finally answered her call. Your boundaries aren't suggestions. Others thought I was throwing away a good relationship over one mistake. He was trying to help in his misguided way, my coworker Lisa argued. Don't you think you could forgive him eventually? What they didn't understand was that this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about a fundamental breach of trust and respect that revealed a crucial incompatibility at the heart of our relationship. Patrick believed he knew better than I did what I needed to heal. This paternalistic attitude would poison any future we might try to build together. 2 weeks after the breakup, I returned to therapy with Dr. Myers, who had helped me through the aftermath of my father's abandonment years before. I should have seen it sooner, I told her, curled into the familiar armchair in her office. There were signs of his savior complex all along. I just didn't think he would apply it to me. What signs do you recall now looking back? Dr. Myers asked. I thought about Patrick's career choice, his tendency to befriend people with problems he could solve, his difficulty accepting when troubled teens at the centre rejected his help. He needs to be needed, I realised. He's drawn to broken things he can fix. And he saw you as broken. The question hit like a physical blow. Yes, he never saw me as whole, just managing my damage. He was waiting for the right moment to orchestrate my healing according to his vision. Dr. Myers nodded thoughtfully. This pattern likely felt familiar to you on some level. A man making decisions about your well-being without consulting you, believing he knew what was best. The parallel between Patrick's behaviour and my father's hadn't occurred to me before. Both men had made life-altering decisions affecting me without my input, justified by their belief that they knew what was best for me. I'm drawn to people who need rescuing, I acknowledged. Patrick's protective nature felt safe at first. I didn't realise it would eventually be turned on me. Over the following weeks, therapy helped me understand the patterns in my relationships. My fear of abandonment had led me to value Patrick's steadfast presence above all else, blinding me to the subtle signs that he saw me as a rehabilitation project rather than an equal partner. A month after the breakup, a thick envelope arrived from Patrick. Inside was a handwritten letter extending over several pages. Unlike his previous messages, this one contained a disturbing level of detail about his interactions with my father. Patrick wrote about their weekly coffee meetings, how he had shared stories about my life with my father, building a bridge between us without my knowledge or consent. He admitted to showing my father photos from my Instagram account, describing my accomplishments, even detailing our wedding plans. I thought I was preparing the ground for reconciliation, he wrote. James was so eager to know about your life, and I felt I was doing something beautiful by connecting him to the daughter he missed. Each revelation felt like a fresh violation. Patrick had shared intimate details of my life with the man who had abandoned me, acting as a conduit for information I had deliberately withheld. He had appointed himself the mediator of a relationship I had explicitly ended. Most disturbing was his admission that he had paid for my father's plane ticket to attend our planned, surprise reconciliation dinner. I wanted to remove any obstacles to your healing, he explained, still framing his boundary violations as acts of love. The letter concluded with a plea for another chance. I've started therapy to understand why I felt compelled to fix this for you without your consent. I recognize now that I was projecting my own need for family harmony onto your situation. Please consider meeting with me and my therapist to discuss a path forward. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. The detail about therapy was the first indication that Patrick might be beginning to understand the fundamental problem in our relationship, but it came far too late to salvage what we had lost. As weeks turned to months, Patrick's attempts at contact became less frequent. My engagement ring was returned to the jeweler, our shared belongings divided through intermediaries, and the practical matters of disentangling our lives addressed with minimal direct interaction. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the clean lines and precise measurements of architectural design. I created spaces for others while rebuilding the boundaries of my own life. 6 months after the breakup, I ran into Patrick at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. I had known he might be there, but decided to attend anyway, refusing to let his presence dictate my social choices any longer. He looked different, somehow smaller, his confidence muted. When our eyes met across the room, he nodded respectfully and kept his distance, until later in the evening when we found ourselves alone by the drinks table. You look well, he said, his voice carrying a formality that acknowledged the distance between us. Thank you, so do you. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken words and irreparable damage. I've been seeing a therapist regularly, he finally said, working on understanding my need to rescue people, my tendency to override others' autonomy in the name of helping them. I nodded, appreciating the self-awareness but still maintaining emotional distance. That's good. I hope it helps. It has. I understand now what I did wrong with you. With us. Patrick looked down at his drink. I never really saw you clearly. I was so focused on what I thought you needed that I couldn't hear what you were actually saying. His admission was the most honest acknowledgement he had made of the fundamental problem that had destroyed our relationship. For the first time, I felt a small measure of compassion for him without the sharp edge of anger. Thank you for saying that, I said quietly. It means something to hear you understand. Patrick looked up, hope flaring briefly in his eyes. Does that mean there's a chance for us to... I shook my head gently but firmly. No, Patrick. Understanding why it happened doesn't erase the fact that it did. Some trust once broken can't be restored. Disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. I know. I just hoped, but I understand. I hope someday you find someone who sees you clearly from the beginning. You deserve that. As I watched him walk away to rejoin another group of friends, I felt a weight lifting. The conversation had provided a kind of closure I hadn't realized I needed. Patrick was beginning to understand his role in our breakup, and I was finally free of the hope that he might somehow become the partner I had believed him to be. The healing process wasn't linear. There were still days when I missed the future we had planned, the comfort of shared routines, the sense of belonging to someone. But increasingly, I recognized that what I had lost was more illusion than reality. The relationship I mourned had been built on a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I needed. True healing, I was learning, didn't come from reconciliation with those who had hurt us. It came from reconciliation with ourselves, from honoring our own boundaries and trusting our own instincts about what we needed to thrive. 6 months after the breakup with Patrick, my life had developed a new rhythm. I moved into a small but sunlit apartment closer to downtown, decorating it entirely according to my own taste without compromise. The space became a physical manifestation of my reclaimed autonomy, every design choice reflecting my preferences alone. My professional life flourished as I channeled my emotional energy into creative expression. The senior partners at my architectural firm noticed my more confident design proposals and assigned me to lead a significant commercial project, my first as primary architect. "There's something different about your work lately," my boss commented during a review. "Your designs have always been technically excellent, but now they have a boldness that wasn't there before." I understood what he meant. In the past, I had unconsciously held back parts of myself seeking approval and validation, even in my professional creativity. The experience with Patrick had forced me to recognize and dismantle that pattern, leading to more authentic expression in all areas of my life. Regular therapy with Dr. Myers continued to help me process not only the recent betrayal, but the deeper patterns that had shaped my relationships. Through her guidance, I began to recognize how my father's abandonment had created a template for accepting less than I deserved, fearing that asking for more might lead to being left again. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is permission to have boundaries. Dr. Myers told me during one particularly insightful session, "Healthy boundaries aren't walls, they're the foundation upon which meaningful connections are built." This perspective helped me reframe my decision to end the engagement not as a failure, but as an act of self-respect and clarity. I hadn't rejected love. I had rejected a relationship that couldn't accommodate my full autonomous self. In an unexpected development, I found myself drawn to a support group for adult children of parental abandonment. Initially attending as a way to process my own experience, I soon discovered that sharing my story helped others while simultaneously strengthening my own healing. When my father left, I thought it was my fault. A young woman named Rachel confessed during one meeting. "I spent years trying to be perfect enough for someone who chose to leave." Her words echoed my own journey so perfectly that I found myself sharing more openly than I had intended. "The hardest lesson for me was accepting that his leaving wasn't about my worth," I told the group. "It was about his limitations, his choices. Nothing I could have done would have made him stay." Speaking this truth aloud to others, walking similar paths, reinforced my own healing. Each time I helped someone recognize their own value, separate from parental validation, I strengthened that knowledge within myself. 3 months into my new life, I received a formal letter from my father. Unlike Patrick's emotional appeals, this was a straightforward acknowledgement of his failures without expectation of response. "I understand and respect your decision to maintain distance between us," he wrote. "I failed you in fundamental ways that cannot be undone with simple apologies. If you ever wish to have any form of contact, it would be on your terms entirely with whatever boundaries you need to feel safe. If not, I accept that consequence of my actions." The letter included his contact information, but explicitly stated that he would not reach out again unless I initiated contact. For the first time, my father was respecting my agency rather than imposing his needs or timeline. After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Myers, I composed a brief response. I didn't offer forgiveness or reconciliation, merely acknowledgement and clear boundaries. "I appreciate your respect for my wishes," I wrote. "I am not ready for any form of relationship and may never be. I have built a good life without your presence, as I promised Mom I would. If my feelings change in the future, I will contact you." Sending this response felt different from my previous interactions with my father. Rather than being driven by anger or pain, it came from a place of calm self-assurance. I was no longer defined by his abandonment, but by the strength I had developed in its wake. Around this time, I finally opened the small package my father had left the night of the confrontation. Inside was my mother's wedding ring, accompanied by a note, explaining that she had wanted me to have it, whether for my own marriage or simply as a keepsake of their love before everything fell apart. Holding the delicate gold band with its modest diamond, I felt a connection to Mum that transcended the pain of recent events. This ring represented not my parents' failed marriage, but the love that had created our family, however imperfect it had become. I placed it on a chain around my neck close to my heart, but not weighing me down. 8 months after the breakup, I attended another gathering where I knew Patrick would be present. Unlike our first post-breakup encounter this time, I felt no anxiety about seeing him. We exchanged polite greetings and even managed a brief civilized conversation about mutual friends. As I watched him interact with others, I noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. The compulsive need to problem-solve for everyone seemed diminished. When a friend mentioned relationship troubles, Patrick listened without immediately offering solutions, a small but significant shift from his former approach. Later in the evening, he approached me again. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his expression sincere. "For what?" "For holding your boundary even when it would have been easier to give in. It forced me to look at patterns I might have continued indefinitely otherwise." He smiled ruefully. "My therapist says I've made progress, but I still catch myself trying to rescue people who haven't asked for help." The honesty in his self-assessment was refreshing. "Growth is rarely linear," I offered. "Recognizing the pattern is the hardest part." Patrick nodded. "How have you been, really?" "Good," I said, surprised to realize how completely I meant it. "I'm leading the Westside Commercial Plaza project at work. I moved to a new apartment downtown. I've been volunteering with a support group for adults dealing with parental abandonment." "That sounds fulfilling," Patrick said, genuine warmth in his voice. "You always did know what you needed better than anyone else, including me. I'm sorry I didn't trust that." His acknowledgement, free from qualifications or expectations, felt like the final piece of closure I hadn't known I was seeking. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." As we parted ways that evening, I realized that I no longer carried anger toward Patrick. His actions had revealed incompatibilities that would have eventually surfaced regardless. In a way, his betrayal had freed me from a relationship that could never have fully honored my autonomy. Dating again was a deliberately slow process. I approached new connections with clearer eyes, watching carefully for signs of rescuer tendencies or boundary issues. I valued my independence too much now to compromise it for companionship alone. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I created a new ritual. Instead of spending the day in grief, I took a day trip to the botanical gardens where she had loved to visit. I brought her journal and my own sitting among the flowers to write letters to her about my journey since she'd been gone. "I kept my promise, Mum," I wrote. "I built a good life filled with love, though not in the way either of us might have imagined. I found love in friendship, in creative expression, in service to others, and most importantly, in myself." As I sat surrounded by the vibrant blooms my mother had so adored, I felt her presence, not as a painful absence, but as a continuing influence in my life. Her final gift to me had not been the ring my father returned, but the wisdom to recognize that true love in any form must honor the full autonomous selfhood of the beloved. The journey from betrayal to self-discovery had been painful but necessary. Through losing both my father and my fiancé to similar patterns of disrespect, I had found something more valuable, the unshakable knowledge of my own worth and the courage to protect it. Life would continue to bring challenges and joys. Relationships would come and go, but the foundation I had built within myself would remain sturdy and true, not despite the abandonment and betrayal I had experienced, but because of how I had chosen to respond to them with dignity, self-respect, and the conviction that I deserved nothing less than complete recognition of my wholeness. In the end, this was the most profound healing of all, not the reconciliation Patrick had tried to orchestrate, or the forgiveness my father had sought, but the deep reconciliation with myself and the truth of my own experience. The knowledge that I was and had always been enough exactly as I am. I hope my story has resonated with some of you watching. Have you ever had to end a relationship because your boundaries weren't respected? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If you found value in my experience, please like and subscribe to support the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing firm in their boundaries is an act of self-love, not selfishness. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true healing comes from within, not from others' expectations of what your healing should look like.